It's time to open up the jowls and take in all the content that movie studios are just heaping upon us. Today, to talk about all the new trailers, I have Remington King, Tony Antoine, and across the sea of the internet, Jason Cedars, joining me today for issue 6 of Last Page. This is going to be exciting because I have to be honest, of all these things that we're talking about, I'm not very excited to see any of them, but I am excited to talk about specifically this first one because it is the most controversial amongst us four, which is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the follow-up to the smash animated hit from 2018.
My name is Miles Morales. I'm Brooklyn's one and only Spider-Man.
So I have a categorically historic problem with Into the Spider-Verse, Across the Spider-Verse, and that is that to me, the character of Spider-Man has been so bastardized by Marvel, where they have split him into so many different versions that it takes what makes Spider-Man cool, his unique powers and his struggle, and it just waters it down. Waters it down so we have all these different spider people running around. And I have to say, the original movie, I was not a fan of Into the Spider-Verse, but it is wildly popular. A lot of people say it's their favorite Spider-Man movie ever. Those people are morons, but a lot of people really enjoy the movie. Before I get into it, Jason, your feelings and thoughts about not only Into the Spider-Verse, but the Across the Spider-Verse trailer that we have watched and what you anticipate from the movie.
I know in personal conversations, you guys definitely know my theory and all this, but I don't think we've quite talked about it here on Last Page yet. But I am a huge fan of the multiverse versions of Spider-Man and everything that comes with it. But I think the statement you just said is like the crux of it right there for you. It's like the actual character of Spider-Man you don't like being bastardized, where it's not more like Peter Parker Spider-Man. It's more of like how he acquired the powers. I feel like that's how they change everything is how they acquire the powers and who acquires it. Is it Gwen Stacy that got bit by it, or if it's a spider that got bit by a radioactive pig? This is my favorite Spider Verse character, the old Peter Porker. Oh, Remy, I love your face. Like, just changes as soon as I start to mention like Spider Pig or any of the, like the random stuff like that. But I mean, that's what's so funny about just origin stories is how much you can just tweak something and it becomes a totally different character. So, I mean, I wrote down a list of the actual amount of spider people that I could pick out in that, and it's like at least 20 or something like that. And that's not even brushing it. So I love all the different versions. I love the origin stories and the different starts and finishes, and I really like where this movie is heading and where I think it's heading to explore more of that universe.
Oh, just I just yeah, I like you, Mav, fundamentally disagree with the entire basis of Miles Morales as a character and not just him, but the premise of Into the Spider-Verse. I don't feel, have we already mentioned Syndrome? I don't know if we've mentioned Syndrome, but if everybody's super,
No one will be.
that's the moral to the story with these movies, is that having a zillion different Spider-Men, spider people, not even people, spider things, because we have spider pigs, Jason. There is nothing special about Spider-Man now. He is meaningless because the only thing that matters is that somebody or something in a suit has a spider symbol on it and they have some sort of spider-esque powers, and that's what makes Spider-Man special according to these fucking movies. The how How much of a rant am I supposed to go on right now?
We'll keep it. We'll come back. Yeah, we'll come back to it.
The only other real that's my initial thought. I'll leave it at that.
All right, so you guys know my eternal love for Into the Spider-Verse, and when I first heard that we were going to do this trailer, I recognized that I was going to be fighting for my life here. Me and Jason were going to be fighting for our life here for 10 minutes that it took for us to get to this argument. So I'm not going to brush across the argument. I'm just going to like brush upon it like very briefly. I think a lot of what gets lost in the translation is the multiverse as a plot point is such a very interesting plot point, and they've done it extremely well of just, taking the core of what makes Spider-Man a hero. He's kind, he protects people, he's brave, he's fearless, he's heroic, he is the perfect hero. He struggles, he misses, he loses his people, and they take that and they apply it to different multiverses. And so I think that takes a lot of creativity. I think that takes a lot of, somehow, because these are kids movies. These are movies that are marketed towards kids, making it a way that's fun of being like, oh, let's take a pig. And, when I first saw the pig thing, it did throw me off a little bit, but I've come like full circle to like appreciate them just trying to do something outside of the normal, because it's so easy to just do another Peter Parker, you know what I mean? But when you strip it away, Spider-Man's like a symbol. It's like not really like a person. And so I think that's the important thing. It's a larger than life thing. So I think, and I know he hates it so much because he loves the character of Peter Parker, but at the end of the day, Spider-Man is, and they touch on it in the first movie, to be Spider-Man, it's not something that's like, anybody could be Spider-Man, because it's this like the things that, Spider-Man is such a hero, he's the hero's hero, that if you embodies these things of a hero, then you can become a Spider-Man if you have these powers or whatever, so forth. But I do want to talk about the trailer, because I don't think really anyone much talked about it. Again, the movie is absolutely beautiful. I love the animation. I will always go toe to toe for the animation. I think it is one of the more beautifully animated movies that I've seen in the last 5-10 years. The comic book style, very, I've seen some movies that have done the comic book style, but they've done it definitely the best that I've seen. The characters, I'm very excited for the movie. I think that this is going to be a great movie. I think that if people can just come outside of their preconceived notions about it, I think it's going to be a very enjoyable movie. But yes, I will step off of my horse now.
Well, part of the problem, and I do agree, I don't think anyone disagrees that the animation of the Spider-Verse movies is phenomenal in terms of trying to take kind of what you see on page and translate it into a movie. It has done it the best of any animated movie that we've seen. There's no denying that. The problem of taking the powers and then smashing it around, so now everybody is a spider person. Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man India. I mean, Spider-Man 2099 came around in the 90s. Spider-Ham is from like the mid 90s. But the idea, Into the Spider-Verse, the creators admittedly ripped off the Spider-Man crossover event in the 1994 cartoon series, where there was different versions of Peter Parker Spider-Man that all got together to try to take out one evil Peter Parker Spider-Man. And the difference is those iterations were iterations that were different versions of this Spider-Man, but that story built up the individual Peter Parker Spider-Man. It wasn't like, hey, here's all these different people to sell to all these different markets so that we can try to make as much money from across the world as possible. It was trying to tell it was trying to get Peter Parker to better himself. And what do we get in this trailer for Across the Spider-Verse? We just get 1,000 spider people to market to every niche corner of the world. And to make it worse, what Into the Spider-Verse did was it took Peter Parker. It was bad enough to steal his powers and give it to 1,000 people. They made him a piece of shit loser that lost Mary Jane. She moved on to someone else. He was fat, eats like a slob. It wasn't enough to steal his powers. They then had to drag his character through the fucking mud. So that is just completely poisoned the well for me. Again, objectively speaking, everyone likes Into the Spider-Verse. Watching this trailer, I just see more of the same. I see more of the how many different versions of Spider-Man can we sell to different parts of the world. And it's just stinks of corporate greed, and I don't like it.
Wow. I could feel the rage like across the sea of the internet about this, you know? And I mean, you have some really good points about like what it has become now, because it is like taking some of these characters from, a 50-year time span and kind of reusing them, rehashing them for other purposes. But, and we've had this argument many times about Spider-Man, but I just want to make this one point. So it's doesn't seem so bad what they're doing. It's all about different writers having to take over the mantle of Spider-Man and what they've done with him throughout so many years. And anything from like the Clone Saga, where it's like, okay, we need to make clones of Spider-Man, and then Ben Reilly and the Scarlet Spider, which, Remy, you like Scarlet Spider though, right?
I do.
Yes. Okay. So I do remember us having this conversation. So, I mean, that is technically, a different, version, but that was just one, writer's artist's stint on the Spider-Man mantle. And what am I going to do with this character? Clone Saga. I've created Ben Reilly, and now I've created the Scarlet Spider. And then now someone else is about to get this mantle. And they're like, you know what? We're going to go superior Spider-Man now. We're going to kill off Spider-Man and have Octavius be in his body. And he's going to be in this next iteration of it. So it is a combination of, going Spider-Man India or something like that, where they create this character who wants to appeal to that audience, and then how the natural flow of writing a character for 50 years is going to have to change. We can't just keep writing the same stuff. So I think hopefully it does that well, because like Spider-Man 2099, it's like, what is happening to Spider-Man now in the future, where, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no more superheroes. I think at that point, 2099 is a whole new like kind of thing where there's no more abilities or something. I can't remember that, but this was what.
It was its own universe. It was. I mean, they created the 2099 back in the 90s, and it was its own thing that was completely disconnected from everything. Spider-Man 2099 was the most popular of that genre. And it was really the only one that took, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, Doom 99 was a thing.
X-Men was one. I remember having a couple of those, but not being very good. So and that was just another writer's stint at Marvel, being like, they had a new group of guys in the 90s, be like, okay, it was probably right after Age of Apocalypse or some other big onslaught or some big thing that happened in the 90s. Like, okay, what else are we going to do right now? Or like, I heard the Werewolf Spider-Man they had a classic, the monsters of Dracula and Frankenstein, like that kind of artist working on Spider-Man for that time. So he wanted to do a werewolf version of him. So many of these things are, who has this mantle? And another is, it's like, let's capitalize on some fun thing. But I mean, I could see the Spider-Man meme pointing at each other over and over again for the rest of my life, bigger and bigger and bigger, with more Spider-Man doing it to each other. And
more.
Jason, you're a glutton.
More.
That's what you
Hello,
are,
yes.
Jason. You're a glutton for this content.
This exact specific multiverse, different versions of people content. Now, and this is me as a comic book enjoyer my entire life. That was what was always got me. I loved this specific thing. So, you guys got me on my some of my favorite subject matter right here. And I feel like that's a lot of the stuff we're about to talk about, is a lot of time travel, multiverse things. They're even now Star Wars and other things that are kind of getting into it. So,
well, what else? What I'll say about the Ben Reilly, the difference being, the Ben Reilly story and those different versions back in the 90s they were different stories of Peter Parker. They were different stories of what if Peter Parker went bad? What if Peter Parker had a clone and he didn't know if he was the real one or not? What would that do to Peter Parker? It was all those splits was all about, and that was one problem actually, or a slightly different problem, was they made all these different comics. There was a Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man. There were so many different Spider-Mans where they had so many different people writing about Peter Parker, where it did get a little muddied, but they did try different things like the Ben Reilly story, but it was still about Peter Parker Spider-Man. Whereas now it's just about how can we take some rando character or create a new character that's just a version or a knockoff of Peter Parker. Anyway.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a thin line; it's a thick black line. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
No, it's good. I think so. To your point earlier about the how you felt about the character as far as Into the Spider-Verse went into, I think when it comes to the multiverse, it gives really talented writers. Which these writers, I will say, these are some of the more talented writers that I've seen. It gives really talented writers a way of seeing. It gives really talented writers a way of like flexing their muscles of just like, it's a very interesting. I feel like we give a lot of grace to Peter Parker where we can't do too much with his character without really die-hard fans getting upset, right? Peter Parker losing Mary Jane and becoming a slob is not a stretch of the imagination. It's something that's so out of character. It is not. Is that not out of character for Peter Parker?
Babe. Oh, Tony.
Is that not?
Tony.
You know what? I'm not even mad, Tones. I'm not even mad because
She doesn't know better.
you don't know better. It's
Oh,
fine.
ouch. No.
No, it's because if she had
From a writing standpoint, is a man not losing the love of his life and going into depressive episode. Let's just think outside of Peter Parker here. I'm sorry that we can't touch Peter Parker, but let's think outside of Peter Parker here. Is a man not losing the love of his life and going through a depressive episode, somehow still getting up and mustering enough courage to be Peter Parker and go out there and be Spider-Man? Is that not something is that not like that? Is that like outside of the realm of possibility that he loses the love of his life? He goes into a depressive episode, and because he's still a hero's hero, he still gets up and he goes out there. Like, this is not outside the realm of possibility. And let's stop pretending like it is. It is definitely inside the realm of possibility that Peter Parker loses Mary Jane, goes into a depressive episode, but still is Spider-Man because that's the only thing he has left. Those are the two things that he has, right? He doesn't have his uncle, he doesn't have his parents. Who knows what happens to his aunt? He has his girlfriend and he has this freaking superhero job. One dies, he goes into a depressive episode. All right, I'm now line up the firing squad. I'm now here.
Tony, I was nice having you on last page. This is probably
I'm sorry. I have touched the holy grail.
writers are writing her off the episode as we speak.
Just
Maverick and Remy are like, that's the last time we let her
static.
her
We're just gonna get
opinion.
static, and then she's gonna be gone in the next clip.
Okay,
Oh
enough of those
my
opinions
God.
that
Let me
don't
take a
agree with
drink.
ours.
Wow.
Oh, I mean, you haven't said anything for a second, so I was gonna let you go.
Maybe your Gen Z just prevents you from being able to understand this, but Peter Parker is a man of intense character. He is character. Okay. He could have gone through a depressive episode when his uncle died. Instead, it formed the person that he was going to be for the rest of his life. He is not a fucking loser by any stretch of the imagination. If he has lost Mary Jane at various points. They have been separated at various points. Does it drive him into
losing Gwen Stacy right in the beginning? Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
I know. I wasn't going to say that. I was like, oh, this is not helping her argument.
He accidentally murders his own girlfriend while trying to save her. Does it send him into a depressive episode? No. It drives him into being more of the same person that he is at his fucking core, which is a hero to the common man, and without discrimination. Peter Parker is steadfast. He is at no point the down on himself, woe is me, like all the shit that in his life is constantly fucking going wrong. Shitty job. And this is what makes Spider-Man the best hero of all fucking time, is that he's a real person. He's a real person who has a job that sucks. He is struggling to pay bills. He has he has family member die. He has his parents are gone. His aunt has failing health. He has to take care of her. He tries to do the work social life balance and fails on top of being a superhero. And he is, again, steadfast. I feel like I'm in a sermon right now. I feel like I'm talking about Jesus Christ. But no, I'm talking about Spider-Man.
Except Spider-Man's more believable.
Except Spider-Man's a real person.
All that walking on water stuff, I can definitely see people swinging around New York.
Yeah. There is so many ways and different places you could have put Peter. That the Peter that they brought back, Tobey Maguire being brought back as the youth pastor look is perfectly acceptable. Like, he's doing the same. He's just a little bit older, because the type of person that Peter Parker is, with Mary Jane or not, would not be a fat fucking loser slob.
I think that this is perfect right here, because this is why like Spider-Verse is so popular, is because different versions of Spider-Man like resonate with each of us differently. You know, it's like, yeah, Tony, you like appreciating the slob version because you're like, yeah, that could happen, you know, and you appreciating the original, version, and me liking the spider werewolf or whatever, the spider steampunk girl with the the 8 legs. It's like we all gravitate towards the Spider-Man. I think that's what this movie's going to capitalize on.
So the only time you said Peter Parker doesn't get down on himself, the time he does get down on himself, which is famously captured with Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 50, where it's recreated in Spider-Man 2, the Raimi movies, is when he puts away the costume. He gets to a point where he puts away the costume and he says, I can't be Spider-Man anymore, because he can't balance his life anymore. And he feels like he's failing at protecting the people he loves. And so he decides to quit. But in doing that, it's not so that he can just become a gluttonous slob. It's a way of him trying to reaffirm and take care of the people he cares about. And that's what you could have done. You could have done a version of that in Into the Spider-Verse, where Peter Parker decides to hang it up because of tragedy, because he's trying to take care of Mary Jane and live a regular life. And then you could have introduced a Miles Morales character. I still would have been against the idea, but that would have been a better telling of the Peter Parker character, instead of a character assassination, basically, of reducing him to the worst form of himself.
Calling it a character assassination is definitely strong words. I feel like in this part, right, where we're at the part of Peter Parker where we don't allow him to be put into situations where we feel like we kind of know like what he would do, other than like in certain situations. Like, I don't know if I worded that correctly, but again, no one has been able to. Is that not like a thing that someone would do when losing someone that they've been with? Like, this is not something that's like out of the ordinary for him to do this, right? The whole trope was a basis thing of being like, yes, he's Spider-Man. Yes, he's all of these things. But when tragedy strikes too hard, yeah, he slides, but he picks himself back up. So I think that's the thing. If we just look at it as like a character assassination of, oh, they just wanted Peter Parker to be some gluttonous slob so they could introduce Miles Morales. No, they're giving him a character arc of, he loses everybody, he backslides for a moment, he comes back.
All right, but let's look at the trend, though. Peter Parker, legacy character, everyone loves him. He's the most famous character next to Superman in the world. He's brought back in this iteration of him. He's a fat slob. Luke Skywalker, all-time great hero, maybe the most iconic. Well, maybe, definitely one of the most iconic movie heroes ever in science fiction. Yeah, no doubt. Is brought back in a modern iteration as a fat slob. Thor, the most masculine, strongest, awesomest character, arguably, in the MCU, brought back as a fat slob. So when you're seeing this trend over and over again, and then when it comes around to literally my favorite character, I don't think it's something that's done for the sake of this is the best story we can tell. It's that there's this idea you have to degrade certain characters that have been around forever to raise other ones up. And I just disagree with that assessment.
I don't think it's necessarily a way of degrading it. I think it's an easy way of telling like the mental strife that a character is going through. A character that prizes their body and how they look in their warrior affections. I mean, how they like their warrior, their warriorness. If we see this character that is clearly not in a state, has clearly let themselves go, we know that as a viewer, we know, oh, that dude's fucked up. Like, he doesn't look fit. He doesn't look like the god that we imagine him to be. He doesn't look strong. He's clearly going through something, right? So when it comes to Thor, right, which I know is like a giant one, and I hate this argument so much. We see Thor at his best for many movies, and then every movie that he's in, he is constantly being broken down. Constantly something is happening to him. And so clearly we get to a point where he's just like, okay, this shit sucks. I'm letting myself go. But like we have to allow characters to be put in positions where we necessarily don't like them. You don't always get to like how your favorite character looks. You don't always get to like the arc that your favorite character goes through. But at the end of the day, it's an arc. You know what I mean? Like I didn't always like how Thor, looked. I didn't always like how Thor reacted to things, but in the long run, it makes sense. All the way up into Love and Thunder. We don't talk about that. But these are the things that
we've talked about it.
these are the things you think about as writers. You put your characters into uncomfortable and traumatizing or events that happen to them, and it helps move the plot along. So I can tell you why Thor looked like that, because it makes sense when you look at his character arc. He's been beaten down. There is not a movie in Thor's arc where something good happens to him. There's not a movie in Thor's arc where something traumatizing doesn't happen to him. So when the ultimate traumatizing thing happens to him and that degrades his mind a little bit, we're able to look at that and say, okay, I understand why he's like that. And when he comes back, we go, oh, yeah, he was a fat slob like that, or yeah, he didn't look his best in that movie, but he came through when it mattered. He figured out like all of these things. We see the very interesting, talk with his mom. He's able to get back to his hero form. It's the same thing with Peter Parker. He loses track of it for a little bit, and helping Miles become the Spider-Man that he is, he gains it back. It's not, they don't put them in, it's called the low point. You know what I mean? It's the low point of a character so that they can have the high point of coming back.
I have a better example of a character that they brought to a low place and then built back up, but I'll let you go first.
Again, it's just a big thing is that these you said it. It's easy. It's the easy, lazy, shitty fucking writer thing to do, which these writers are. It's the easy writer thing to be like, oh, Spider-Man has had it rough, so he's just a fat slob now. This is Peter Parker, and he sucks. And because it's not important to these. At best, it's not important to these writers to write Spider-Man or to write Peter Parker in a good light. The story is only about Miles and making Miles look fucking cool and making Miles the most important character that does the right things and is not a loser. Peter Parker gets to be the easy loser of this story. Again, very simply, could have just been retired. He could have just been fucking retired. He could have just been, but the character, again, somebody who doesn't care about Peter Parker, you don't understand what his actual, like, it's out of character. It doesn't makes if the Peter, he wasn't a fat slob, he turned into a psychopathic murderer. That's just as fucking likely. That's just as fucking likely that, and it would be like, oh yeah, we found this Peter Parker, Mary Jane died, and guess what? He slaughtered a bunch of children. That's as likely as him becoming a fat slob. Straight up. No, I'm serious. Like that is the same level of likelihood of those two events happening. It's so out of character, and these writers, they don't give a fuck about Peter Parker and being true to his character. This is a Miles movie. It's not about doing anything justice to Spider-Man, to the original Spider-Man or Peter Parker, and writing a story arc that actually makes sense, because it's important to write a story arc that makes sense for a character, and that doesn't make sense. There is so much OG Peter Parker content that would point you to, if he was going to turn into a fat slob, he had a bunch of opportunities to do it. And Mary Jane dying wouldn't be the one. As much as she is the love of his life.
Well, it wasn't even that she died. She just broke up with him.
Oh my God. If he got broken up with, divorced. Divorce is the thing that's going to put Peter, no. It just literally wouldn't happen. But again, these writers don't care about Peter Parker at all.
I'll give Jason the last word because we got to move on. But the character I was going to bring up is that in the movie Skyfall, which is a James Bond movie, it is a movie where James Bond, at the beginning of the movie, he gets shot and then he goes into retirement. People think he's dead. And what ends up happening is that he's lost a step. He's not the same guy. He's been off, like, trying to just be retired. And they end up bringing him back. And he's lost a step. He's a little shaky. He's not quite as fast as he used to be. And he has to, throughout the movie, kind of find himself again. But so he's a step behind. He's not the same guy, but he's still James Bond. He's still the guy that has the suave, and he can put on the tux and the tie, and he goes into the room and he can still kill it. He still has all those abilities, and he gets better as the movie goes on, but you still find him in this moment where he doesn't want to be James Bond anymore. And that, to me, was much more effective and true to a character than what we've seen in the Spider-Verse movies.
I'd like to talk about the villain, Spot.
Right. At some point, we should probably talk about what actually happened in the trailer.
After 40 minutes of talking. It was so funny. I was sitting here the whole time. I'm like, and, in Fat Spider-Man, I don't think he's even fat in this one anymore. He's got the baby in front of him. Mayday is his little pouch. So it's like, we're talking about a character from the last Spider-Verse movie that's not even as much of this one. So, yeah, I know we might have to make this segment all just about Spider-Verse love and hate, and then maybe get to something else. But I think this villain is actually so cool. Like, I don't know much about him. I had to do a little research on him, but I remember him from the original Spider-Man cartoon, like him making his appearance on that. But finding out that actually he will have some origin ties to the machine that Doc Ock and Kingpin made in the first movie, and kind of origin story in the comic books. It was Kingpin trying to replicate the abilities of Cloak, which is like Cloak and Dagger, this kind of anti-villain or anti-hero kind of duo, and the scientist working on it becomes a Spot guy. So I can see them using almost that origin story in this. But I laughed out loud numerous times in the trailer with Spot's abilities, like him leaning on something and then being a spot on his arm and the bread just tumbling out of his stomach there. And then clearly he doesn't know how to use his powers either, because he tries to go into the ATM machine only to have his hand come out, on another wall where he thinks his powers goes into something, but it's not going into it. It's like coming out somewhere else. So he's clearly doesn't even know how to use his own power. So I'm really intrigued of how the multiverse thing and the Spot villain is all going to kind of come into play with that. And one other really fun bit of Easter egg thing that I got from research, that they actually dove into this with the comic books recently. It's why Spider-Man has a spider sense and what is the spider sense. And it's actually them being aware of the moment that a multiverse is happening. So a bullet is coming at Spider-Man. If he didn't move at this point, this would have made Spider-Man, die, and that's multiverse going. So that's the spider sense telling you, hey, there's a multiverse moment happening right now. And if you don't move out of this car or this bullet, there's going to be another version happening. And so they link it all to like there's this multiversal spider web going to every spider person throughout the Spider-Verse that connects their spider senses to each other, and they're helping each other out because of course, they have to explain everything in comic books, either good or bad. I just think about the midichlorian thing in Star Wars. So this is another one of those. It's like, did we really need to know how the spider sense works? And they're tying it back to the multiverse and all this different versions. So that's the type of stuff I want to talk about in this trailer thing. It's not our fat Spider-Man love or hate.
Well, it will be coming out June 2nd, so you are only a couple months away from seeing the return of an absolutely wonderful iteration of the Wall Crawler.